wild when you think about it. The same biological rules for, like, tiny bacteria.
Right.
They apply to the biggest animals, too.
Exactly. It really connects everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So you mentioned wanting a solid understanding of biology. I think this excerpt is the perfect place to start.
I think so, too.
Let's break it down.
Okay.
So first things first, what exactly is biology?
Well, at its core, it's the study of life. I mean, it's a lot more than just cutting things open in a lab, you know?
Yeah.
It's about how life works, all the little mechanisms, from tiny molecules
Wow.
all the way up to, like, entire ecosystems.
I'm seeing a theme here. The excerpt really emphasizes how important biology is in our daily lives.
It really is. Just think about new medicines,
Right.
like the mRNA vaccines.
Oh, yeah.
Those came about because we understand cellular biology and genetics.
It's a direct impact.
Exactly.
That is a fantastic example. Okay.
Yeah.
So we know what biology is, but how do we define life itself?
Well, the excerpt lays out 7 characteristics of living things. It's like a checklist for life.
Ooh, checklist for life. I like that. Let's go through it.
Sure.
Okay. Number 1, feeding.
Basically, everything alive needs to take in energy
Makes sense.
to grow, to, fuel all those complex processes.
Oh, yeah.
Plants use photosynthesis. We eat food. It's all about energy.
Even the smallest organisms have figured out how to eat. That's amazing. All right, what's next?
Movement.
Okay.
This one's tricky because it's not always obvious movement.
Right. We picture like animals running,
Right.
birds flying.
But even plants move.
Really?
They grow towards the sun. Their roots reach down for water.
Never thought about it like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of motion we don't see.
So even stuff that seems still.
Is actually moving.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've got feeding, movement. What's number 3?
Breathing or respiration.
Okay.
It's all about exchanging gases.
Mm.
Like, we breathe in oxygen,
Yep.
which our cells need to make energy.
Right.
And we breathe out carbon dioxide, which is waste.
And our bodies just do it.
Pretty amazing system.
It is. We don't even think about it. Speaking of getting rid of waste, the excerpt mentions excretion.
Exactly. It's super important.
Yeah.
We got to get rid of stuff that could build up and be harmful.
Makes sense.
Our kidneys filter our blood. Our lungs get rid of carbon dioxide.
It's like taking out the trash.
Exactly. Got to keep things clean.
Love it. Okay, so we've got feeding, movement, breathing, and excretion. What's next on our checklist?
Growth.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward. All living things get bigger, more complex over time.
Makes sense.
Like a seed becomes a tree.
Yeah.
Or a fertilized egg becomes, well, us.
That's amazing. So much complexity from something so tiny.
It's pretty mind-blowing.
It is. All right, next up is sensitivity, right?
Yep. Living things are constantly interacting with their environment.
So like reacting to things.
Exactly.
Like-
They sense temperature changes, light, touch, all sorts of things.
So they can adapt and survive.
Right.
So everything from a sunflower facing the sun,
Zoo dog.
barking, is a form of
Yeah, it's
sensitivity.
nice. It's about how organisms perceive the world.
Wow. This is fascinating.
Uh.
Okay, last one. What's number 7 on our checklist for life?
Reproduction.
Okay.
This is all about making more life.
Right.
Essential for, continuing the species.
Yep.
Some do it sexually, mixing genes from 2 parents.
Yeah.
Some do it asexually, making clones. Lots of ways to do it.
So many different strategies.
Yeah.
So those 7 characteristics, feeding, movement, breathing, excretion, growth, sensitivity, and reproduction, they really lay out what it means to be alive.
They do. And it's incredible how differently those characteristics show up,
Right.
across all the millions of species we have.
It's a lot to take in, but I'm loving it.
Me too.
This excerpt really makes you appreciate how complex nature is.
Totally agree.
Speaking of complexity, the excerpt also talks about all these different branches of biology.
Oh, yeah. Biology is huge. It has tons of branches. Each one focuses on a specific part of life.
Can you give me some examples?
Sure. There's zoology. That's the study of animals.
Makes sense.
Then there's botany for plants.
Gotcha.
And ecology, which is about how everything interacts with its environment.
That's a lot. So many things to study.
Yeah. It's a very broad field.
I'm really curious about immunology, since we were just talking about vaccines.
Immunology is fascinating.
What's it all about?
Well, it's the study of the immune system.
Okay.
Our own personal defense system.
Right. Keeps us safe from, bacteria and viruses.
Exactly. Understanding it helps us with, treating diseases, allergies, even organ transplants.
That makes total sense. Speaking of viruses, what about virology?
Virology is all about those tiny infectious agents. viruses.
Okay.
They can cause everything from a cold to, like, HIV or Ebola.
Oh, wow.
Scary stuff. Virologists are trying to figure out how they work, how they spread, how to stop them.
Got to be a super important field, especially now.
Yeah. Especially with new viruses popping up. It's constantly evolving.
Okay, I see one more thing in the excerpt that's kind of intimidating. Taxonomy.
Oh, taxonomy is not that bad.
What is it exactly?
It's how we classify organisms.
Okay.
Based on shared characteristics, like making a family tree for all life on Earth.
A family tree. So taxonomy helps us figure out how different organisms are related.
Exactly.
Gotcha. That makes a lot more sense.
Plus, it helps us see how everything fits together.
Like a big puzzle.
Yep. And how different species evolved over time.
Okay, I have one more question before we move on.
Shoot.
Okay, so we talked about zoology, botany, virology, but what about mycology?
Mycology is the study of fungi.
Like mushrooms.
Mushrooms, molds, yeasts. The whole fungal kingdom.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah, they're incredibly diverse. And they do so much for the environment.
Like what?
Well, they're decomposers. And some are symbionts, which means they have mutually beneficial relationships with other organisms.
Symbionts? What's that?
Think of like a fungus that helps plant roots absorb nutrients.
Whoa. So it's not just about mushrooms and mold.
Definitely not. Fungi have huge impacts on our lives.
Ah.
From the yeast in bread to penicillin, which revolutionized medicine. They're all around us.
That's pretty wild. Makes you realize how much we don't know.
There's always more to learn.
Okay, let's move on to the next section. Cells.
Right.
The excerpt talks about different types of cells. What's the deal with that?
Well, it gets into prokaryotes and eukaryotes.
Okay.
The two basic types of cells that make up everything alive.
So prokaryotes and eukaryotes.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
The main difference is in their structure. Prokaryotes are simpler. They don't have a nucleus or other, like, membrane-bound organelles.
What are those?
We'll get to that. But think of bacteria.
Okay.
Single-celled, super adaptable. You find them everywhere.
And eukaryotes are more complex.
Right. They do have a nucleus where their DNA hangs out.
Gotcha.
And they have those membrane-bound organelles, like little compartments that do specific jobs.
Oh, so animal cells, plant cells, those are eukaryotic.
Yep. And fungi, too.
That cell structure difference sounds like a big deal.
It is one of the most important distinctions in biology.
How so?
It's key to understanding all sorts of stuff, like disease, evolution.
Oh, well.
Even how we develop new technologies.
So we zoomed in from ecosystems to cells. And it's just as complex down there.
It really is.
I can't wait to learn more.
Let's dive in. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It really highlights how, even at the cellular level, life is crazy diverse and complex.
Right. And what's even cooler is that all these cells are constantly talking to each other.
What?
Yeah. They send signals, coordinate their activities.
To make sure everything runs smoothly.
It's like this whole world is happening inside us and we don't even know.
Pretty much.
Incredible. Now, the excerpt mentioned something called the taxonomic hierarchy. Can you unpack that for me?
Oh, yeah. So the taxonomic hierarchy, it's basically a system for classifying organisms.
Okay.
Scientists use it to group things based on, like, their evolutionary relationships.
Yeah.
It's a series of nested categories.
Yeah, nested.
Yeah. It starts broad with kingdom, then gets more and more specific. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species.
So it's like a family tree, but for all living things.
Exactly, like humans.
Yeah.
We're in the kingdom Animalia,
Okay.
then the phylum Chordata, class Mammalia,
Makes sense.
and all the way down to the species Homo sapiens.
So each step down gets more specific.
Yep.
Taxonomy helps us understand how everything's related.
Right. And also where each organism fits in the big picture of life.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
It's about organizing the chaos. I like it. I noticed the excerpt also mentioned binomial nomenclature. What's that all about?
Oh, that's just the fancy way of saying we give each species a two-part name.
Okay.
It's their scientific name.
Like instead of dog or cat?
Exactly. Common names can be confusing, you know.
Yeah. Right.
Different places, different languages, but the scientific name is always the same.
Gotcha. So it's like a universal language for biology.
Precisely.
Awesome. Okay, back to prokaryotes and eukaryotes. The excerpt goes into more detail.
Yeah.
What are the key differences?
Well, like we said before, prokaryotic cells are pretty simple.
Right. No nucleus.
Right. And no other membrane-bound organelles. Their DNA just kind of floats around.
Okay. And eukaryotes are more complex.
Much more. They have a nucleus that holds their DNA.
Yep.
Plus all those other organelles we talked about, like mitochondria, which make energy.
Oh, right.
And chloroplasts in plants for photosynthesis.
So it's like these organelles are little specialized compartments within the cell.
Exactly. Each one with a specific job.
Like a tiny factory.
Perfect analogy.
The excerpt also mentioned that prokaryotes are usually smaller than eukaryotes. Is that always true?
Generally, yeah.
Okay.
But of course, there are always exceptions in biology.
Right.
Some bacteria, for example, can form these long chains that you can actually see with the naked eye.
Whoa. So there's always something that breaks the rules.
Always. Keeps things interesting.
I'm curious about, the history. Which came first, prokaryotes or eukaryotes?
Oh, that's a good question. Scientists believe prokaryotes came first. Way, way back, billions of years ago.
Yeah.
Eukaryotes showed up much later, probably through symbiosis.
Symbiosis, what's that?
It's when two different species have a close relationship, like a long-term partnership.
Okay.
In this case, it's thought that mitochondria and chloroplasts were once free-living prokaryotes.
Yeah.
Then they got swallowed up by other prokaryotes.
Oh,
But instead of being digested, they struck up a deal. They started working together, benefiting each other.
That's why.
And over time, they became so intertwined that they couldn't live apart.
And that's how we got eukaryotic cells.
Exactly. It's like a team effort that changed the course of evolution.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What are some examples of prokaryotes and eukaryotes?
Well, prokaryotes include bacteria, of course. They're, everywhere.
Right.
And then there's archaea. They like extreme environments.
Like what?
Oh, hot springs, deep sea vents, places most things couldn't survive.
Wow. Tough guys. And what about eukaryotes?
Eukaryotes are super diverse. Everything from tiny single-celled organisms like amoebas to, all multicellular life, fungi, plants, animals. That's us.
So everything that's not bacteria or archaea?
Pretty much. And all of it came from that one ancestor billions of years ago. It's mind-blowing.
Speaking of things that are not alive.
Oh, yeah.
The excerpt says viruses aren't considered living organisms.
Right.
Why is that?
Viruses are tricky. They're kind of in between living and non-living. Yeah, they're like little packages of genetic material, either DNA or RNA, wrapped in a protein coat. But the thing is, they can't reproduce on their own.
They can't?
Nope. They need to infect a host cell and basically hijack it to make copies of themselves.
They're like tiny pirates.
Yeah, kind of. They totally depend on their host for everything.
And they cause all sorts of trouble.
Oh, absolutely. Some of the nastiest diseases are caused by viruses.
So we talked about different types of cells. What about their role in human health?
Oh, both prokaryotes and eukaryotes play huge roles in health and disease.
Okay.
Let's start with prokaryotes. Some bacteria are good for us, like the ones in our gut that help us digest.
Right.
But others can cause infections like strep throat or pneumonia.
So it's a mixed bag.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then eukaryotes. Well, those make up our bodies, right?
Better.
And understanding how those cells work is crucial for treating things like cancer and heart disease.
It's all connected.
It really is.
The excerpt also mentioned how important biology is for things like agriculture and environmental science.
Oh, yeah. Biology is everywhere.
Can you give me some examples?
Sure. In agriculture, biologists are trying to breed better crops, ones that are resistant to pests or disease.
Makes sense.
They're also figuring out how to improve soil health, make sure plants get the nutrients they need.
So we can grow more food.
Exactly. And then in environmental science, biologists are studying ecosystems, how organisms interact.
All right.
They're working to protect endangered species, preserve biodiversity,
Right.
and understand the impacts of climate change, which is huge.
It really feels like biology touches everything.
It does. It's super interdisciplinary.
I'm seeing that. Okay, what about the future of biology? Anything cool on the horizon?
Oh, tons of stuff. One area that's getting a lot of attention is synthetic biology.
Ooh, what's that?
It's basically designing and building new biological systems, engineering them to do specific things.
Wait, so we're talking about creating new life forms?
Well, not necessarily creating from scratch. It can also be about tweaking existing organisms.
Okay.
Giving them new abilities. Like, scientists are trying to make bacteria that produce biofuels or, clean up pollution.
Whoa. That's amazing.
Right. It has the potential to change, everything.
And what about gene editing? I've heard that's a big deal, too.
Gene editing is huge. It lets us change an organism's DNA with pinpoint accuracy.
Sounds like science fiction.
I know, right? But it's already happening.
Really?
Yep. They're using it to develop treatments for genetic diseases.
Wow.
And to create better crops. The possibilities are endless.
It's kind of mind-blowing.
It.
But with all this power,
Uh-oh.
I'm sensing some ethical concerns.
Oh, absolutely. We have to be careful with this stuff.
Right.
It's a big responsibility. We need to think about the potential consequences, make sure we're using these tools for good.
It's not just about what we can do. It's about what we should do.
Well said.
So much to consider.
It's a lot, but that's what makes biology so fascinating, right?
Absolutely. And before we wrap things up, I want to highlight something you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
About the ethical considerations with all this new tech.
Super important.
Because as we learn more about biology,
we gain more power to manipulate it.
Exactly. And we need to use that power responsibly.
Right. Think about the impact on future generations. Make sure our choices benefit both humanity and the planet.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's been an incredible journey exploring biology with you.
I've loved it.
I feel like I have a whole new appreciation for, like, the complexity of life.
Me too. It really makes you think.
Well, yeah.
Absolutely. It really makes you realize how much we still have to learn.
Exactly. And speaking of learning, our excerpt wraps up by talking about those two main cell types again, prokaryotes and eukaryotes.
Right.
Can you give us a quick refresher on what makes them different?
Sure. So prokaryotes, those are your simpler cells, like bacteria, no true nucleus. Their DNA just hangs out in the cytoplasm. Eukaryotes, on the other hand, they're more organized. They have a nucleus to store their DNA.
Right.
And all those other fancy organelles.
So, like, our cells are eukaryotic.
You got it. Humans, animals, plants, fungi, all eukaryotes.
It's crazy how much diversity there is, even within those two basic types.
It really is. And that diversity is what makes life on Earth so incredible.
Now, the excerpt says that understanding cell types is, like, essential for understanding so much about life, disease, evolution, even new technologies. Can you break that down for me?
Absolutely. Let's start with disease. Lots of diseases are caused by bacteria, right?
Yeah.
And bacteria are prokaryotes. So if we want to fight those diseases, we got to understand how those cells work.
To develop antibiotics and stuff.
Exactly. Now, think about evolution. That shift from prokaryotes to eukaryotes, that was a huge GE deal.
How so?
It allowed for way more complex life forms to evolve. It set the stage for everything we see today. And then there's technology. Lots of cutting-edge stuff relies on knowing how cells work.
Like what?
Well, genetic engineering, for example. We're manipulating DNA inside cells to do all sorts of things.
That's wild.
Yeah, it has implications for medicine, agriculture. It's changing the world.
It really seems like cell biology is at the heart of so much.
It really is.
You know, we talked about the ethical side of things earlier.
Yeah.
And it feels especially relevant here. We're gaining so much power to manipulate life at the cellular level.
That's a great point. It's exciting, but it's also like a little scary, you know?
Totally.
We have a responsibility to use this knowledge wisely.
Right. It's not just about what we can do, it's about what we should do.
I love that. We need to consider the long-term impacts of our choices, make sure they're good for humanity and the planet.
Well said. It's been an incredible journey exploring the world of biology with you.
I've had a blast.
I feel like I've learned so much, and it's made me even more curious about the natural world.
That's awesome. Keep asking questions. Keep exploring. There's always more to discover.
Exactly. And for our listeners who are ready to dive deeper, I highly recommend checking out the resources listed in that excerpt.
Oh, yeah. Those are a great starting point.
And remember, biology is always changing. There are new discoveries happening all the time.
Exactly. So keep learning and keep wondering.
Until next time, folks. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the amazing world of biology.